Staying informed these days, it feels, well, overwhelming sometimes, right? So much coming at us all the time. But what if you could cut through all that noise and just get to the real breakthroughs, like really understand them? That's what we're doing today, taking a deep dive into some pretty exciting stuff, drones, and how they might change how we get medical supplies. We're basing this whole dive on notes from the Future Transport Zone project, where they've actually been doing real-world trials.
Yeah, think of it like this. These notes, it's like getting behind the scenes at a science day stand, where they lay out all these different drone projects and what they're finding, gives you a real feel for what's actually happening, not just the hype.
Totally. So our mission here is pretty straightforward. We're unpacking how drones could be used practically, what the roadblocks are, and what this whole future might look like for medical deliveries. And honestly, some of this stuff in these notes, it's pretty surprising. We're talking about the very first drone flight in the UK where the pilot couldn't even see it, then trials where they actually tried carrying chemo, serious stuff, and then get this, even drones delivering your morning coffee. I mean, come on, that's pretty cool.
Right. So let's start with how this whole thing got going. The notes talk about the Windracers Ultra, this aircraft actually born at the University of Southampton. Back in May 2020, it hit a big milestone. The UK's first BVLOS flight that's beyond visual line of sight for those playing at home. This was like the first step showing, hey, autonomous flight between the mainland and an island, it's doable. Opened up a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, it took off from Leon-Sullen Airfield and went over to Binstead, which is on the Isle of Wight. Back then, the whole focus of the Future Transport Zone project was seeing if they could create what they called an air bridge for those, emergency COVID responses. Show how an autonomous aircraft could reliably connect the mainland with the island.
And what's really interesting is while they did have one fully loaded flight that made it, the notes mention a bunch of other trial flights that, well, they didn't actually land on the Isle of Wight for various reasons. Shows you, even in these controlled environments, things can happen, right? The real world's a bit trickier than a test lab.
100%. So next we've got the Apian and Skylift trials happening in 2021 and 2022. They were looking at VTOL drones, that's vertical takeoff and landing, using the electric Megan V29 model, to see if they could actually transport chemo between Portsmouth from Baker Barracks to St. Mary's Hospital on the Isle of Wight. I mean, think about what that could mean for patients needing critical treatments. Pretty huge.
Now, important to note here, and the notes make this clear, they didn't actually fly chemo across the Solent in these early trials. The point was to actually have the chemo on board and see if those vibrations during the flight, would mess with the medication's effectiveness. What they learned was crucial. Drones can carry sensitive medications without messing them up, which a lot of people thought wouldn't be possible.
Right, it really challenged some assumptions. And they must have gotten good data from those tests because Apian went on to make something like 7 flights with actual pharmacy products for Boots, flying them across the Solent. So real-world application coming directly from that research. Plus, Apian's still at it. They're working with Wing in London right now, testing blood sample transport between Guy's and St. Thomas's hospitals. It's like watching this whole thing evolve in real time.
It is. So carrying on that whole vibration theme, the notes detail experiments with the Modini X1, another electric VTL drone, this one rotary wing. Focus here was on monoclonal antibodies, which are, key for treating certain cancers. These things went through the ringer, repeated takeoffs, hovering, flights, and landings to see how they'd hold up.
Rigorous testing is an understatement. And what'd they find? Well, testing at King's College showed that these sensitive medicines, they didn't degrade after their little aerial adventure. Pretty significant, wouldn't you say?
And it's not just anecdotal. This research has been published in actual journal papers, so there's some real scientific weight behind it.
Definitely gives it more credibility. Adds to the whole, hey, we can actually use drones for delicate medical stuff argument. The notes also briefly touch on the Spotter drone, another one out of Southampton. Petrol engine, fixed wing design, so not VTL. They use this one for vibration testing on monoclonal antibodies too. Interesting to see how they're looking at different drone tech for similar medical transport applications. Yeah, getting those different perspectives on how flight stresses can affect things.
Yeah.
And then we've got the Titan drone, developed by Motion Robotics. This one's a bit of a pioneer. It was the first to get CAA approval, that's the UK's Civil Aviation Authority, to actually drop packages from the air.
Yeah.
Opens up a whole world of possibilities for how and where you can deliver things.
For sure. The notes mention it was used in drop tests at Landbed in July 2023 and then again at Draycott in May 2024. They were specifically looking at developing those, tough crash-proof containers for carrying medical stuff that could be dangerous. Imagine being able to airdrop critical supplies in places where landing just isn't safe or even possible. That's a game changer for emergencies.
Massive. So we've seen how they laid the groundwork, tested things out, proved the concept. But where are we now? What's happening with drones commercially? Where are they actually being used in the real world?
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. The notes highlight what manner drones are doing. They're actually operating in Dublin, Ireland, and parts of Texas. And the scale of their operation is mind-blowing. Over 300,000 deliveries in Dublin in the past 4 years. I mean, that's a lot of flights. And get this, 30% of that is hot coffee.
You're kidding. 300,000 deliveries. That's a crazy number. And coffee being such a big chunk of that, well, I have to admit, I didn't see that coming. But it does show their whole business model, right? They're all about that quick convenience in those suburban areas. Notes say their average flight time is just 4 minutes.
Exactly. Tapping into that I need it now mindset. And they've made the economics work too. Average order is 2-3 coffee is something like 15 euros total, plus a €4 delivery charge. And with the drones doing 80 kilometers per hour, delivering with a cable system, well, they're beating those bike couriers hands down when it comes to speed.
Efficiency is king.
Mm-hmm.
Then we've got Wing, who are also doing similar rapid delivery stuff, food and drinks, in Australia.
Yeah.
But what's really relevant for us is their upcoming trial in Dublin.
Mm-hmm.
They're partnering with Appian on this one to look at hospital-to-hospital medical deliveries. Sounds like things are moving towards those more essential applications.
Definitely. Like a shift from those, consumer deliveries to something more critical for healthcare. And let's not forget Zipline. Their medical delivery operations in parts of Africa, they're on a whole other level, geographically speaking. They're mainly focused on moving blood stock using fixed-wing drones launched by Catapult, by the way, and then they drop their packages by parachute.
Totally different approach compared to those, localized rapid deliveries that Manna and Wing are doing. But in those areas where infrastructure is not as developed, where the terrain's tough, that catapult and parachute system probably makes a lot of sense. Just goes to show how adaptable drone technology is.
Couldn't agree more. Now, while all this is super promising, the notes also point out some, speed bumps they've hit. One of the big ones is getting those BVLOS permissions beyond visual line of sight from the CAA here in the UK. Seems to be a bit of a struggle.
Yeah, they specifically mention how it's a lot easier in the Republic of Ireland, where the Irish Aviation Authority has what they call UAS geographical zones for drone operations. Quite a contrast, isn't it? Really highlights how those regulations can either speed things up or slam on the brakes.
Makes a huge difference. Another challenge they bring up is really understanding that urgency factor in medical supply chains. Like, what actually is urgent, and what does that mean for how you use drones for logistics? It's not just about being fast, it's about getting the right stuff to the right place at the right time.
Makes you think. I mean, needing blood for a trauma patient is a whole different ballgame than needing, say, a regular prescription filled. And the notes also talk about how tricky it is to apply those existing laws, like those dangerous goods regulations, which were written for those big crewed aircraft, to drones, trying to fit a square peg in a round hole almost.
Right. The rules need to catch up with the tech, especially when you're talking about sensitive medical supplies.
Absolutely. So we've talked successes, we've talked obstacles. Let's shift gears and talk about those potential benefits that drones could bring to medical logistics. What are we looking at here?
Well, the Nates really emphasize the whole accessibility thing. Drones can get to those hard-to-reach areas, especially during emergencies. Think remote communities, disaster zones where roads are blocked, that kind of thing. That kind of access at the right moment, it can be a lifesaver.
No doubt. And the notes also mention transporting essential medical equipment like those AEDs, automated external defibrillators. Imagine a drone being sent out with one of those to someone having cardiac arrest, getting there maybe even before an ambulance. That's the kind of thing that could really bump up survival rates.
Exactly. And then there's how well suited they are for transporting those small, really urgent things. Rare blood type needed at a distant hospital, a time-sensitive lab sample. Drones are perfect for that kind of fast point-to-point delivery, bypassing all the traffic and logistical headaches.
So it's all about speed, access, and dodging those limitations of traditional transport. Looking ahead, then, what needs to happen for these drone medical services to become, the norm?
The notes lay out a few key things. First off, drones need to be designed to work with those standard NHS medical packages, those Versa packs. If they can't easily and securely carry those things, well, it's going to be tough to integrate them into the healthcare system.
Pragmatic, but true. Can't just expect the whole medical packaging system to change overnight. And then there's the whole collection issue.
Yes.
There is a good point. Those cable systems, great for dropping things off.
Yeah.
How do they work when you need to pick stuff up, like samples, used equipment?
Mm,
Might need to actually land those drones for that to work properly.
good point. And they emphasize the whole size payload thing. Weight limits are one thing, but sometimes it's the actual volume of medical supplies that's the problem.
Makes sense. Might not be heavy, but bulky, like a big box of bandages or a piece of diagnostic equipment. And you absolutely need those things to be reliable. The notes mention needing good gust tolerance. They're talking 18 meters per second if you want drone deliveries to be as reliable as those vans, regardless of the weather.
For sure, can't have them grounded by a bit of wind. And then there's the money side of things. How many drones can one person realistically manage at the same time? That's going to affect costs, whether the whole thing's even viable.
Yeah, it's a juggling act, efficiency, safety, and keeping it affordable. And then, of course, there's the big one, safety in the skies. How do you manage all these drones flying around with those traditional aircraft? Got to figure that out if this is going to work long term.
No doubt, our air traffic control systems are going to need a serious upgrade to handle all that, keep everyone safe. The notes also stress that these drone services need to fit into the existing healthcare logistics, like what the NHS is already doing. Can't be some separate thing, needs to be integrated.
Seamless is the word. And they end with a really interesting question. Could this whole delivery and collection process become completely automated? No human interaction at the delivery point at all. Could be even safer that way.
That's the dream for a lot of folks, right? Minimize human error, make it all super efficient. Whether that's through fancy drone tech, automated loading and unloading, or those secure self-service points, that level of automation could be a game changer.
So as we wrap this up, it's clear that drone technology, it has the potential to revolutionize medical logistics. We've seen huge leaps forward from those early test flights to what's actually happening commercially right now.
But we've also seen that there are some pretty big challenges ahead. Those regulations, the practical stuff like packaging and collections, making sure it all works with the existing systems, those all need to be addressed.
At the end of the day, though, these advances, they could bring some major benefits. Faster deliveries, better access, more efficient overall. It's a pretty exciting time to be watching this unfold.
And it leaves us with something to think about. What does it mean for society as a whole to become more reliant on these autonomous systems for our healthcare? And what other crazy innovations are just around the corner, things we can't even imagine yet, all built on what we've learned from these early trials and all the bumps along the way? The story of drones and healthcare, it's really just getting started.